My name is Dustin Kelly, but everybody calls me DJ. I'm prior Army, serving as both a Ford observer and a military police officer. I spent the last 14 and a half years as a police officer and detective in a large metropolitan police department. Two things that I've learned throughout my career. One, everybody has a story to tell. And two, the best stories are true. This is the DTD Podcast. In 3, 2, 1, and we're live. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the DTD Podcast. This week in the studio, a man who came from humble beginnings in West Virginia to becoming a Green Beret with 10 combat deployments and ending up as the Chief of Business Operations for the National Medal of Honor Museum. In his career, he's conducted numerous operations to include combat search and rescue, counter-sniper operations, and special reconnaissance, just to name a few. My guest has spent a life of service to his country, teammates, and his fellow man. He retired from the Army with 26 and a half years of service and now spends his days promoting the legacy of the recipients of the Medal of Honor, an honor that less than 0.01% of service members have ever been recognized for. He's here this week to tell his story. It's my honor to introduce you to Darrell Utt. What's going on, my friend?
Hey, what's up, man? Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, I'm so glad you're here. We have a lot to talk about. I usually start with family, but I really want to ask you something. In learning about you, reading about you, and talking to you on the phone, the first question I have for you is, what does the word service mean to you?
Service. I think that's a great question. I think it's something that you do that's higher than yourself. You know, it's something that you do to give back to your community, to your family, something you do higher than yourself.
Here's the reason I ask you, and I know I put you on the spot, and I told you I was going to kind of jump it off, but I wanted to ask you that because with your service to me, it's more than service. It's selfless service. And the reason I say that is because we've talked about stuff that you have planned in the future, and you've told me when you were getting the story out that people thought it was just about you, and you said it's not about me at all. It's about my team. It's about the people that served around me. Pictures that you've sent me, stories that you've told me about the guys that are in the pictures. Everything that you talk about doesn't revolve around you, which it should because it's your story, but it never does. You always talk about the other guys that are involved. And I think there's a difference between service and selfless service. Selfless service is always putting that other guy ahead of you. And to tell you right off the bat, I think you've always done that in your career and what you've done with me, what you're doing for the Medal of Honor Museum. You always put everyone else first. Can you agree with that?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm glad the way that you worded it sounded definitely a lot better. But yeah, that's for sure. I try to do that. I came from humble beginnings. I'm still that humble kid from West Virginia that grew up poor, and my parents didn't even graduate high school. So I feel like I still have that chip on my shoulder. I still carry that. But I really, the way that you put it was perfect.
Well, let me ask you about those humble beginnings, because you quite candidly tell a lot of people, and you say it, when you say it, you say, I'm not telling you this lightly. Neither one of my parents graduated from high school. You said they instilled in you hard work, determination, but I've never heard you explain it as you just did, like with a chip on your shoulder. I think that's interesting to look at in your career. And I almost wonder now, looking over it, was it that you were trying to impress your parents or impress yourself with what you were doing?
Well, I think obviously I was trying to make my parents proud, but I think I carried maybe their burden, or they got married young, they started having kids, and life started totally different time period, for them. So I think I took that upon myself, and I put that chip on my shoulder that I wanted to do more things. I wanted to go higher and continue to achieve. And I think I just carried that for them. I was proud of them. I don't say that to be negative toward my parents. Obviously, I mean, they're both deceased, but you know, have a lot of love and respect for my parents, and they come from a different time period, and I felt like I just tried to carry that with me. I felt like I had a lot of opportunities. The military, man, they were so good to me. They opened up a lot of doors. They gave me a lot of opportunities, and I was able to achieve a lot. And I have a lot of gratitude for the way that I grew up. I mean, I grew up hard, grew up poor, but I appreciate everything that my parents did for me. My dad spent a lot of time with me and turned me into a man, and sports and hunting, fishing, trapping. Talked about some of those things before, but my mom she also had a big part. I think a lot of my mental toughness comes from my mom. She was a tough, tough woman. My dad drank a lot when he was younger, and that caused a lot of issues. And my mom worked at a mental institution, and she would come home often with black eyes or a big busted nose or something like that. So I definitely got a lot of toughness from my mom. Just really appreciative, have a lot of gratitude.
When you look back on your life growing up, like you said, there was a lot of hunting, trapping, that you grew up poor. When you look back as you joined into the military, you finished your college degree, then your master's degree. Did you ever look back and think, man, I never thought that any of this was possible? Like when you started this journey, coming from that humble of beginning, did you ever think that you would end up where you're at? Because let's be honest, now you rub elbows with some big wigs, the people that you work with, the people that are associated with the museum. Did you ever think this kid that grew up poor would ever end up as well as you did?
No, no, not at all. I mean, I just had a meeting late last week. I was in the same room with Chris Cassidy, who's our president and CEO. Former Navy SEAL, chief NASA astronaut, very accomplished. In the same room with Charlotte Jones, who's the chairwoman of our board and executive vice president, chief branding officer for the Dallas Cowboys. Reed Cordish from the Cordish Company. Just, you're right, some very, very high level people. I have to pinch myself sometimes, but no, I never thought that as a kid growing up in West Virginia, that I would have that type of opportunity, because I wasn't a great student. I mean, I was decent, average, just good enough to continue to play sports, basically.
Stay
Um,
eligible.
yeah, stay eligible, and I never would have thought, and that I would like to say this, about the military. I'd like to highlight the military. The military provided me with a lot of opportunities. That's how I got my bachelor's degree. It's how I got my master's degree. I was able to transfer my GI Bill over to my son, so he could get his degree. And man, the military was fantastic to me. They took care of me. They provided me a lot of opportunities, and um, here I am today, and I have a lot to thank the military for.
Well, I wanted to ask you another thing about your youth. When you looked at it, were you ever angry? Did you grow up in an area where you saw the haves and the have-nots and you thought, I'm going to make better? Or because you hear a lot of guys, they'll tell you, look, I joined the military to get the hell out of where I was at. I knew that it was a dead end where I was going. Was it ever like that? Were you ever, I don't want to say angry about your childhood, because I don't think that was it at all, but did you ever look around and go, there's got to be better out there? I know I can do better. We talked about, did you ever think you would get to the level you're at? But did you also, on the opposite end of that, ever think like, man, I got to get the hell out of here to do better for myself, for my future family, for all that?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that I went around as an angry kid. Definitely had as most 17, 18-year-old males. You got the testosterone thing going, and all of that. You're trying to prove yourself, and I wouldn't say that I probably ran around angry too much, but I did realize that I grew up. I was born and raised in Huntington, West Virginia. Um, not a ton of opportunities. My dad worked in a glass factory his whole entire life. And then, you know what happened with glass and plastic, that whole transition that happened way back in the day. So that whole factory got shut down. And I just knew there weren't a lot of opportunities. And I knew my parents didn't have the money to send me to college. So, so the military was an option for me. It was something that I was interested in, that I wanted to do. My football coach, I was lucky. I had a great football coach that pushed the military, because he was National Guard Special Forces. So
Let's talk about Carl Thornburg for a minute. Sergeant Major, National Guard, okay, 19 Special Forces. And I've heard you say before that he was one of the most influential people in your life, which struck me kind of funny because I think of how much you respected your parents, how much you learned from them. But to hear that this football coach was also on that same kind of level.
yeah, he definitely was. He definitely was. I mean, I played high school football. Coach Thornburg was my coach all 4 years. He started out as an assistant, and then I believe maybe my junior year, he took over as the head coach, and just spent 4 years with the man, and that was pretty much all year round, because we did weightlifting in the off season. Of course, he also was the wrestling coach, and I didn't wrestle. I kind of regret that looking back, but yeah, spent a ton of time with Coach Thornburg, and he took us to weightlifting competitions, and my junior summer, I think it was my junior summer, he took us up to Camp Dawson in the mountains of West Virginia, and gave us a taste of the military. But once I had some time in service, I realized that he basically ran our football team like a special forces team. So that was pretty cool once I realized what he was up to. You know, didn't realize it at the time, because I was just a young kid. But
Well,
uh,
that's what I was about to say. Do we ever realize until later on?
no, no, man, you know how it is. You're plus, a lot of guys are hard headed and stuff like that. And I remember too, being in high school, and it's like, oh, Coach Thornburg, Special Forces. Like, I remember my dad being impressed with that. Like, oh wow, that's awesome. But to me, it was like just kind of far away. It didn't really sink in. But as soon as I entered the military, and then I started learning more and more, I was like, oh wow, what an accomplishment, what a feat.
I want to ask you finally about growing up in your family. I want to take those three people, your father, your mother, and the coach. And I want you to give me one thing that each of them you carried into the military, but more than that, carried into your special forces career and beyond into today.
Yeah, it's a great question. Interesting question. Like I said earlier, I think I got a lot of my mental toughness, don't quit, keep fighting. I got that from my mom. I got that mindset from my mom. She's just a very, very tough woman. A lot of the hunting, trapping, fishing, those type of skills, those outdoor man type skills, I learned that from my dad. And I would say Coach Thornburg, probably there's a combination of a ton of things that my mom and dad both gave me, that he gave me, as well as being on the football field, and physicality and mental toughness, and also composure and patience. We made it to the finals. No, no, I'm sorry, not the finals. We made it to the playoffs my senior year, and we were getting beat. And I think this is a pretty valuable lesson as far as composure and being a man, and you got to be able to take your wins with your losses. And we were getting roughed up there pretty good toward the end, and we had a lot of guys hurt. We were up against a bigger school, and we just got outplayed, outperformed, outcoached, out everything. And I was getting a little chirpy there toward the end of the game, and he called me. He put in a substitute and sent me out. And he said, "Hey man, this is your last football game forever. You don't want to get kicked out of this game. Hey, they were the better team. They won the game. We lost the game. You have to be able to accept that. That's life. That's a life lesson." And those are some of the things that Coach Thornburg taught me.
Well, I wonder where the service thing came in, and that's why I asked the three things. I haven't really heard you say any of that. Do you think that came along later in your life, later in your career, or did you have kind of that feeling right off the bat? Because you went 11 Bravo, you went to the 7th Infantry Division. So I mean, you're right off the bat. You're working in small teams and stuff like that. Did the service come later on to you, or was that from the very beginning? Did you pick up that need for service, that want and desire to serve kind of your fellow man growing up, or did that come later on in the military, not necessarily when you joined the military?
Gotcha. Yeah, I think I eventually evolved into that. Like when I first started, I was such a young, dumb kid. The military was more of an adventure, and it's kind of a job, but it didn't really evolve. I kind of evolved into that service and wanting to serve, and then it was pretty much on steroids once I got to Special Forces and that environment and that dynamic, the team dynamic. So I think my patriotism, all those things kind of evolved gradually over time.
Let's talk about Big Army for you before we go kind of into Special Forces, because I think the Big Army part of your career, I think it might have drove things later on in your mind, or maybe in the desire of what you wanted to do. But we're talking 90 through 96 was your, kind of Big Army career. I came in 94. I did the split option. But around that time, 90 through 94, there was some stuff going on. But I think that you were in some different kind of parts of the military. You had the end of the Cold War. You kind of had that stand down with little pop-offs. And I've talked to a couple of people like that. When you're in that time period that you were in the beginning in Big Army, was it everything that you thought it was going to be, or did you have a different expectation in the Army? Because, like I said, there were things going on, and you had a couple guys in your unit that I think had been in just cause. But other than that, it's a pretty, I guess you'd say, quiet world at the time for Big Army.
Yeah, we felt a little left out, man, to be honest with you, because I graduated basic training and AIT, I was down at Fort Benning, Georgia, and I was part of a cohort. It was, I don't know if you've ever heard of that. Have you heard of the cohort program?
Yeah, so cohort is when you go in with a group of guys, you do basic AIT, and then you all get stationed at the same unit together, right? Or the same division.
Yeah, we were all stationed together. So yeah, man, that was kind of a weird setup. But I
And
was
you
part of the
missed Desert
cohort.
Storm, right? Because of how you did.
Yeah, we missed Desert Shield, Desert Storm because we were light infantry, and they really didn't need light infantry for Desert Shield, Desert Storm. But because we were a cohort unit, and you have all these basic trainees that just graduated, so you got all of these privates that are getting shipped to a unit. Well, then you
That
got to
sounds like a
also
great
have
idea.
right. So then you also have to ship over the non-commissioned officers, the folks that get stuff done. And we had a lot, and I don't know who came up with this idea, but a lot of our non-commissioned officers that were in charge of us were all like mechanized guys from Germany. And we're light infantry in Fort Ord, California. And we're walking everywhere we go with a rucksack on our back. So, it was a really strange, weird dynamic. But, we weren't needed for Desert Shield, Desert Storm. We had just missed Operation Just Cause. So even though we did see some of those combat vets, they weren't in our specific unit because we were all brand new. All of the privates were brand new. All the NCOs were brand new. So it was really kind of a weird setup, man. And we tried to navigate through that as best as we could. And, my initial contract, I was 2 years at Fort Ord, California. And then our cohort was supposed to ship over to Korea for a year. And I thought that was that was great. This was going to be awesome. But then they decided to deactivate the 7th ID Light Infantry. And, this is funny. They decided to deactivate the 7th ID Light Infantry after they spent tons of money on posts, like redoing all the roads and doing a bunch of buildings and stuff. I don't know who set that whole
Yeah, because then they
debacle up.
moved you to Fort Lewis.
Yeah, then they moved us to Fort Lewis and was up there for a year. So yeah, it was kind of a mess, man, to be honest with you.
So let's get your initial thoughts on the Army, because I know how you feel about them now. But your initial thoughts, you're going through, you're in this cohort. I mean, at least you know the guys that you're going through all this with, and you become close, and not split up. But when you look at the Army and you see what you're doing, there's got to be like a little disappointment in you, especially like when you don't get to go to Korea and stuff. There's got to be some disappointment floating through you.
Yeah, yeah, there was definitely some disappointment. But what's really strange? I felt like I got lucky. Looking back, I got lucky. You know, because we didn't have enough team leaders and squad leaders. NCOs, non-commissioned officers. Um, I was a team leader from day one. Like day one, I showed up. I had my own team, which I didn't know what to do with it, but I learned quickly to be a team leader on the
So
job
what
training.
rank is that?
I was an E2, and then I got promoted. I was an E2 team leader, and then I made it all the way up. I ended up being a 20-year-old E5. I was a 20-year-old sergeant who couldn't even buy beer on post. So I started out, man. I was fast tracking. I was doing pretty good, but I definitely did have some disappointment. But once again, it's kind of like you don't know what you don't know. So then I think probably more of my disappointment came when we shipped up to Fort Lewis and we were right beside Second Ranger Battalion, and I started seeing those cats, and I was like, "Holy cow, man! These guys are on a whole nother level than what we are. They train different, they look different, they dress different. They're like superstars." So then you get a little bit of a complex because you're like, man, we're way down on the food chain here. And at this time, I still hadn't been exposed to special forces, even though first group, you know, is headquartered right there at Fort Lewis, Washington. But they're a different part of the post, so we never really got to see them. But we were right beside Second Ranger Battalion, so we got to see how good those cats were. Um, and that was where I started kind of looking. My eyes got open a little bit, like, oh wow, there's different things out there in this great big army. Maybe there's something for me. Maybe there's something for Darrell out there.
So when you looked at that though, and you saw like, hey, this could actually happen for me, um, and you start kind of putting those pieces in place. You're not an E5 yet, of course. I don't think, are you? Well, you might have been by the time you got to Lewis. You might have been a 5.
Yeah, it's a 5.
So when you look at that and you think, okay, let's start moving around. What are your thoughts on how to move around? Like you see the Rangers, you see that there's a different kind of world out there. What are your thoughts in order to move? Because you hadn't had jump school or anything by then, right?
No, by this time I had been to air assault school.
Okay.
I was a combat lifesaver, and I had my expert infantry badge.
So you're
Um,
not doing bad.
Not doing bad, not doing too bad. No Rangers, no Ranger tab, no Ranger school. Um, but I think probably I made a decision. I ended up getting married, and I made a decision to PCS. I reenlisted for Fort Campbell, Kentucky, primarily because it was 5 hours from home, and the hunting and fishing. I was still. It took several years before I got removed kind of from the hunting, fishing, trapping deal. At some point I just didn't have time to do that anymore, and I kind of lost that hobbies. But Fort Campbell, Kentucky was so close to home. It was a 5 hour drive, and they had great hunting and fishing. And it's like, wow, I'll go check out Fort Campbell and be part of the 101st Airborne, even though they're not an airborne unit.
Well, they're an air assault
No,
unit,
no disrespect.
and they're an air assault unit, and you had your air assault wings. So, how
Right.
is being married?
Rough in the military, as you probably
Okay.
know. So,
Well, let's talk about this marriage that you're talking about now. You get married at Fort Lewis. You sign
I was
on for
actually
4 months.
married at Fort Ord.
Oh, really? So,
Yeah,
how long had you been married by the time you go to Campbell?
just a couple of years, a few years.
Okay. How is it though being married? Is it still rough being, young, doing the things that you're doing, and now you kind of have your eye on doing even more. So, is it rough? Is it an easy go? How is it?
Being younger and we weren't really that super. I mean, we still had to go. We spent a lot of time in the field away, but it was good. Being young, you don't really know anything, so it was more kind of an adventure. It kind of defined like how it was for me being in the army in my first couple of years. It's kind of how my first marriage was. So it was more of an adventure. We had a good time.
So, 94, 96, you're at Campbell, 101st.
Mhm.
Not till 96 is when you attend assessment for special forces. So that 94 to 96, what are you kind of doing? How are you moving around in the military and stuff? What do you got your eyes set on, and what are you doing extra to kind of start moving towards that?
Yeah, so I was part of the Rockassons at the 101st, 3rd Battalion, 187th Regiment Rockassons, and we had a lot going on. We were training, and looking back at that, it kind of makes me laugh now because it was like we were training for World War II with bunkers and trenches and all those type of things. It just kind of cracks me up a little bit, but at Fort Campbell is when I first caught glimpses of this Special Forces group, and that really, really piqued my interest, and I was really intrigued, and I was interested, and being in the Rockassans, hardcore infantry, discipline, physical fitness, all of the key things there to be in an infantry unit, but kind of at a they made it kind of at a dumb level. Like, geez, guys, I mean, we don't have to be this dumb about it. But no disrespect. I'm just giving you my experience. But I had my eye on fifth group, and I saw those guys training, and it just really piqued my interest, man. I mean, the way they were doing things made a lot of sense to me. They were constantly out there on the range. They looked different. They acted different. The guys seemed a lot more mature. Everyone was physically fit. Not saying that our guys weren't, but they were just at a different level of fitness. So I just continued to train, continue to try to get better. We had, we had a rotation of Sinai, Egypt for 6 months in
The
'95 to
MFO.
July. Yeah, multinational force and observers. And yeah, I was at checkpoint 3 Bravo, which which is the route that you would take to see. I forgot the name of the mountain, man. Forgive me, but where Moses received the Ten
Sinai.
Commandments.
Mount Sinai.
Yeah, Mount Sinai. There you go. So you had if you were in that time, if you were in that area in '95 to early '96, and you were going to that specific place, you probably drove by me at checkpoint 3 Bravo. But yeah, that was Sinai, Egypt, 6 months, and nothing really to do over there but train and get fast and do a lot of push-ups and do setups, and we did play some killer softball. Really enjoyed doing that. So I started just getting in shape. I was like, man, I'm going to go to Special Forces Assessment and Selection and see if I measure up with some of the top guys in the Army. See if I can do it.
So, are you thinking the military as a career now? Because you did the first two, and then you signed on for the additional four. Are you now looking like this is what I'm going to do?
Starting to go down that route. Definitely starting to go down that route, but I would say I'm not 100% like bought in, but I'm definitely probably creeping that way.
Okay, so here's an interesting thing to me then. You're on your way there, but you're not there yet. But you're thinking about going in with the elite, but it's still not yeah, this is what I'm going to do for life. I've got to kind of understand that, cuz I mean, if you look at it from the outside, you're thinking, "Well, why do that then?" If you're looking to be with the elite and you're looking to do this, why would you not just do it for the rest of your career, or until you retire? So can you kind of walk us through what you're thinking and why you're not quite there at 100% of, yes, this is going to be what I do? Is it because of you haven't made it yet, or is it you're just not that sure about the military?
Well, I think a lot of it's the fear of the unknown. You don't know if once you get ready to go down that route, like, you go to Special Forces Assessment and Selection, and it's like, you know what, if you have it in your mind, I'm going to Special Forces Assessment and Selection, then I'm going to go to the Special Forces Qualification course, then I'm going to go to a team, and I'm going to be on the team for a few years, and then I'm going to do this, and this, and this, and it doesn't work out. You've got this whole, thing planned out, and I'm not saying that's, a terrible way to go about it, but I think for me, my brain just wasn't, I was more in the here and now. This is where I'm at, and these are the things that I'm going to work on. And this, once you fast forward a few years, which I'm sure we probably will, and we'll get to it. But there was a certain point where I had over 10 years in. I'd been in Special Forces. I'd been a, sniper, ranger, long tab, all of those things. Been in over 10 years. And I was considering maybe I should go be an air marshal, after 9/11. That sounds like a cool deal. Thank God that didn't happen. But, it was something I think that, just kind of weighing your options, thinking things through. But I think that's where I was at. I was committed to the task, and I wanted to do selection. I wanted to go through the qualification course, but I wasn't ready to say, hey, this is what I'm going to do for the next 30 years.
So let me ask, because I know how it was for me whenever I got out of the military. I thought maybe I can do better. Is that kind of the thought that you had?
Yeah, once I did get to that point, where I'd been around for a while, I'd had a lot of deployments, had a lot of schooling, and not really knowing the civilian side and how the money works. And, it looks like you don't really make that much money in the military, but you don't really understand the tax implications at that point,
Very
because
much
wow,
so.
it's a big, big change for you. But, and then you start looking at, and I guess that's saying it was true. It happened, the grass is green on the other side. You hear about these air marshals, and, you think that there's going to be more 9/11 attacks, and, maybe you could help and serve in a different way, and do something to prevent a future attack. And you think you're more on the front line than being a Special Forces Green Beret, for gosh sakes. What I was thinking, I don't know. But thank goodness I had someone that I reached out to that had been in Special Forces, ended up retiring through the advice of someone else, through a buddy. It wasn't like one of my main guys, but I ended up talking to him, and he's like, listen, man, you've been in over 10 years, 10, 11, 12 years. You would be absolutely insane if you got out of the military right now. You're almost there. You have a few more years. Continue to serve, get your 20. Do not get out and throw everything away. So I was glad that I received that advice, because I was kind of borderline. Little stupid stuff kind of gets on your nerves, but then you realize that that little stupid stuff's going to be probably where you're
Everywhere.
at on the law enforcement side, where I'm at now. I mean, anywhere you go, you're going to have people that you might have conflict with, and little stupid stuff. So you just have to deal with it.
When you're there and you're kind of at that moment, we've said that we kind of look at it, we think we can do better. What rank are you sitting at now?
I believe I was at E7 at this time.
Wow. And so that makes it even more stick out to me. You're a platoon sergeant, an E7. You've got it made. I mean, you got a couple more steps to take at 10, 12 years, and you're going to step away from it.
Yeah, thank goodness I didn't. So
Did fear, I want to ask you this, and please be honest with it. Was there ever fear of getting out? You know what I mean? Even when you're thinking about, like, maybe I could do better, maybe I could do this, was there ever a fear once again of the unknown where you're like, oh, yeah, but I don't really know that? Because your whole adult life had been spent in the military. And that's a scary thing to step away after everything you did into a world that you really don't know.
You ain't lying, man. You ain't lying. I mean, I ended up spending 26 and a half years in and retired, and I was that's fear, and I knew it was time. Like there's no grass is greener on the, like it's time, like 26 and a half years, it's time to move on and do something else. And I had some fear because, it's almost like you're institutionalized, that's like you said, that's all I knew was the military. I knew I was going to get paid twice a month. And I knew that if I needed to go and get, something for my headache or my knee hurt, I knew exactly where I needed to go. I mean, everything is really easy. It's really simple when you think about it. I mean, it's very structured. You have a job, you go do your job. Rank is simple. I mean, you understand who's in charge, who's not in charge. I mean, so leaving that and venturing out into the unknown, man, I mean, I was scared. That yeah, that's definitely got some fear going for sure. Because you want to be able, I had two kids. My son was good. He was going to college, but my daughter was still finishing up high school when I ended up retiring, and it's like, okay, well, I know that I'm going to get a pension, and I'll probably will get some sort of disability. But other than that, like I still have bills I need to pay. I got to take care of my kids. I got to take care of my family. So, man, that's a scary point. That's definitely a scary point.
I want to go back to something you said about it's easy. You know pretty much everything that's going on. It's like Groundhog Day. I mean, you do. Don't get me wrong; things change up, but pretty
Yeah,
much
yeah.
it's going to be Groundhog Day. I've even heard guys say that when they're deployed, that's easy because you don't worry about anything but the mission. You don't have to worry if this bill got paid or running kids somewhere or anything like that. All you're focused on in the mission. When you deployed, and you deployed a lot, was it the same way with you where you thought, man, this is really easy doing this?
Yeah, man, I could get so laser focused being deployed, and I was one of those guys. There's different kinds of guys that deal with being away from home, and I would say there's guys that like to talk to their wife and their kids every night, or emails, phone calls, whatever. For me, I was the type of guy that I wanted to have little involvement because I wanted to stay laser focused. And sure, would I talk to my wife or my kids then? Yeah, of course. But I wouldn't be the guy that's doing it every single night. I tried to kind of maintain. I tried to compartmentalize as much as I could. I needed to do that so I could stay focused on what we were trying to do, and we were trying to crush bad guys. And going back and forth from talking to your daughter and reading her a bedtime story or something like that, it was just really hard for me to continue to do those transition. I have tons of respect for all the great dads and the great moms out there that can do those type of things when they're deployed, but it kind of changed me a little bit. And yes, I would talk to my family, but I was probably on the more of the minimalist side than someone that did it over and over, every night. But
So let me ask you, looking back on it, hindsight's 2020. Now that you look back on it, you see where you're at. Do you regret that? Because I have a feeling I understand you were laser focused. I'm thinking the way I would think, though. I think that when I got to the end of it, I would go, man, maybe I missed something. Maybe there was something there. Do you feel that? And I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm just asking, do you have that kind of feeling about it, or when you look back on it, does that occur to you?
no, I don't have any regret on that, like the communication piece. I mean, I did the best I could. And I feel for me, like I feel like I did something right because, my guys got through. I got through, and it was my job to bring everyone home. So I was able to do that. And now, do I regret, those 10 deployments and being gone and missing, my son's baseball games and things like that? Yeah, like, oh, sure, man. Like, you don't get those times back. You just don't get those times back. I mean, life is very precious, you have to take advantage of those things. But for me, I didn't have that. I didn't have that chance. You know, I was deployed a ton, and it was the timing. Now, I will say this: talking about things are easy, like being deployed and being laser focused, and you have a support element that's keeping you going. You know, I was a single dad for several years toward the end, and that's a hard job, man. That's a hard, thankless job, and for someone that's not like um, what's the word here? For someone that's not like maybe like a great caretaker, like nurturing, and I can make all these fancy meals, and I mean, it was tough for me as a single dad with two kids, trying to run around them and get them in places, and I often did say I gave mad props. I was like, man, it was easier for me to be in Iraq with a team and operating a team than being a single dad and trying to make two different events work out. So I have nothing but mad respect for the single parents out there, especially our single parents in the military, or they have a spouse deployed or something like that. That's a flipping hard job, man. That's a tough job.
Absolutely. And here's the thing that sticks out for me when you say that. You're like, I could fix, a great meal or anything like that. You did the best that you could. And then I look at the flip of that coin and I look how well you ran your teams. And I've got to think at some point there's a little bit of overflow from that. I mean, you run your teams exceptionally well. You talk about bringing everyone home. Does any of that pour over into being a father, or is that just a different kind of world?
I think so. I couldn't cook an elaborate Thanksgiving dinner, which I still couldn't. And even, man, I tried. I got to tell you this. You probably laugh at me for this. I went to one of those places where you can order the Thanksgiving meal, and it's like, oh, it's all you got to do is come pick it up. And I was like, I took them at their word. Like, okay, sweet, that's what I need to do. Like, I want to go pick up a meal, bring it back home, I'll lay it all out, and we'll be good, man. Like, I'm the guy. Like, this is going to happen. What I didn't realize is it's like all frozen. Like, you still got to cook the stuff, and I'm like, well, shoot, man, this didn't do me any good. Like, this was a disaster. Like, I don't know what to do with all of this stuff. But now I will say this: I did my best. I'm probably not giving myself enough credit, and I will pat myself on the back a little bit right now. I do think I did a great job as a dad. Maybe I did miss some gymnastics, or I was late to a basketball game, or I got stressed out a little bit over something stupid that I probably shouldn't have. Um, but looking back, hindsight 2020, my son's serving in the Army. He's a young E5, and he had a great year. Last year, he won a lot of awards, and they were doing the best squad competition. They made it almost all the way to the end. So they were crushing it the whole way through. Very accomplished. So he's a young E5 in the Army. My daughter, went through community college, 2 years of free community college, Sand Hills Community College in North Carolina. And then she graduated from Appalachian State. So my son and daughter both graduated from Appalachian State. Son's in the Army, daughter's working, getting ready to get married this year, and just two great kids. Very proud of them. We stuck together as a team. It wasn't always perfect, but nothing really is. So
Absolutely.
looking back, I was probably a little bit more critical of myself because I'm looking around at all the moms and dads that are there, and they're bringing cookies to the game and to the coach, and I'm just like, man, I'm just trying to figure out if we're going to go to Taco Bell or Chick-fil-A tonight.
All right, so let's talk about some of these deployments. I want to kind of focus in because a lot of guys don't talk about the Balkans and stuff, and you spent a lot of time over there. Um, can we talk about that a little bit? What kind of your job was over there? Because I know you did a lot of different things over there. You worked counter sniper operations and stuff for presidents that were coming over, but you also did the personnel indicted for war crimes. You did a lot of that searching. Was that really how you cut your teeth as a special forces operator, was over there and you really learned? Because I think, and tell me if I'm wrong, what you did there and what you did during the GWAT, Would you say they're completely different missions?
Completely. I mean, with the exception of the PIFWICs, the personnel indicted for war
Okay.
crimes, manhunting. We did a lot of manhunting in Iraq, like tremendous amounts of manhunting, and but for everything else, you're right. That is where I cut my teeth when I showed up. The air war was in full swing, and we were already heavily involved in the Balkans anyway. So my first couple of missions as a newer special forces guy was doing the combat search and rescue. We would spin up and we would leave Germany, and we would typically go down to San Vito, Italy, and stage out of San Vito, and we would wait. If they're going to start the air war, a bunch of times, nothing really happened, and we went back home. We were kind of the 9/11 force, the 911 force, if you will. But then the air war did start, so we continued to do the combat search and rescue. We did have 2 pilots that were shot down. We did like a 3-day on rotation, 3 days off, and wouldn't you know it, both shoot downs. It was the other split that got to go in. But we did get. We realized after the first pilot got shot down that they were picking up our aircraft, because at that time we were staged up at Tuzla, so we had the whole combat search and rescue package staged right there. After the first pilot got shot down, they realized, like, hey, these guys are coming in from Tuzla. So we figured that we needed to change up our signature a little bit, and we just didn't want to lift off, like, hey, there's a pilot shot down, lift up. So we actually decided to do, the leadership decided, not me, not Darrell, but they said, hey, we probably need to do a couple of feints here so they don't know exactly what's going on. And I was on one of those flights where they said, hey, we're going to go lift off and fly around for a little bit. And just to keep people honest here, we're not going to fly all the way in, but we flew all the way to the border, ended up getting shot at pretty good. Luckily, we survived through all of that. But yeah, both pilots that got shot down, it was a different split. And then we ended up rolling into Kosovo. I think that was in 1999. So we were the first Special Forces company in there. We actually infilled in these big tractor trailers. It was kind of comical because we didn't have enough vehicles to get everyone in. So yeah, did some work in Sarajevo with the PIFWICs, the personnel indicted for war crimes. The first time we did that was a lot of pattern of life. When we actually did the PIFWIC captures in Kosovo, much later, this is probably 03, 04. So a lot of the national assets they'd been gone from Sarajevo, they'd been gone from Kosovo. We still had some lower level guys. We were able to do that. So I got to cut my teeth a little bit on the manhunting. We did a lot of special reconnaissance. I wouldn't even say strategic reconnaissance, but we did a lot of special reconnaissance on the border. Spent some time on the border of Macedonia and infill routes and equipment coming in and things like that. We reported back. So I really got a great taste of what that. I mean, we had a lot of great success too. I mean, in filling in, we were working with SEAL Team 2. They would go out and we would be their QRF, and then we would go out and they'd do the same for us. Had a lot of success. We didn't get, at least my team, we never got compromised while I was out there. It's just hard, man. It's hard to be out in someone else's backyard, and they know the backyard and you don't. It's hard to not get compromised. You probably know this, man, from all the work that you do in law enforcement, man. It's hard to be sneaky.
Well, let me ask you, and I'm glad you brought that up, sneaky, because I would say with this and being sneaky, it's more of a law enforcement. There's a lot of surveillance. There's a lot of, like you said, pattern of life where you're just watching a guy come and go and learning what they're doing with their life, who they're meeting with, who they're talking to, and it's a lot of intel, not a lot of shots fired. And even with your PIFWICs that you did, there wasn't a lot of shots fired there. So
no, none in Kosovo.
Right. So when you're doing something like that, does that alter your thinking a little bit? Like, man, I'm a Green Beret and we're doing all this stuff and we're crushing these guys and bringing them in for justice and all that kind of stuff. But do you feel more like law enforcement than an actual, a door kicker?
No, because at this time, this is pre 9/11, so we felt like we were the top dogs, man. We felt like we were tip of the spear, man. We were out there doing things. Well, actually, not all of this was pre 9/11. The majority of it was pre, like all the combat search and rescue, and some of the things in Bosnia was pre 9/11. But toward the latter part, I guess it was already past. But pre 9/11, man, we thought we were the cat's meow. We were, if I can steal some language from John Stryker Meyer, that we just talked to yesterday. Thanks for the
Sure.
intro to him, by the way. MacV Sog, man, what a legend. Um, but we thought we were tip of the spear. Then, of course, 9/11 happened and GWAT broke out, and Afghanistan and Iraq. But I think for the Special Reconnaissance, we learned a ton, and there was so much still going on in the Balkans. I mean, we still had to navigate around landmined areas and things like that. So it wasn't like it was just a training exercise in the back 40, a Fort Campbell. Like there were still a lot of threats. I'd say probably we had an incident where we got shot up pretty good in a hide site while we were on the border of Macedonia. I think it was more of a recon by fire than actual legitimate engagement, but which I think is pretty common in the Balkans. It happens, but I mean, it was real world, man. It was no joke, and we were hitting our communication windows and sending back pictures, and intel was going up to higher. So we felt really good about what we were doing, and we knew that we were crushing it.
And I hope by no means I didn't mean that in a way. I love that part of the job. That is a very cool part of the job. The reason I bring that up about because you hear a lot of guys want to be in the thick of it and stuff, and that sometimes can be monotonous a long time, especially if you're doing long patterns of life and stuff. And I'm of course speaking from the law enforcement perspective, so it could be completely different for you guys. But you don't hear a lot of those stories, and you really don't hear a lot of those stories coming out of the Balkans, Kosovo, Bosnia. That almost, would you agree, is kind of a forgotten thing that we did. I mean, a lot of people don't bring that stuff up. Would you
So,
agree?
dude, it was forgot on September 12th, 2001. Everything that we had, because a lot of the guys that ended up going and doing great things in Afghanistan and Iraq cut their teeth in the Balkans. I mean, national level units, SEAL Team 6, Delta, a lot of those guys were cutting their teeth in the Balkans before Afghanistan and Iraq and eventually Syria and all that. But yeah, man, that was forgotten September 12th. It was like, yeah, what is this all about? And no disrespect, I didn't take any disrespect. I like the sneak and peek, man. I'm down with
Absolutely.
it.
And the reason I bring that up of not being necessarily a door kicker at that time or anything, that sneak and peek stuff is super interesting to me, but a lot of people don't talk about it. It's very forgotten. Even if you talk in law enforcement stories, people are like, I want to hear about the warrants that are being served and I want to hear about the takedowns and stuff. They don't want to hear about you watching a guy for 3 days or 4 days or figuring out who his mom is or where he banks at or anything like that. But it's very interesting. And I think with it being overlooked, I think a huge part of the story is taken away from the end result. A lot of people want that very end, the
It's
blood
the
and guts and
sexy.
the yeah,
Yeah, it's
the
the sexy
sexy part
part.
of it. But you can't get there without that other stuff. And it's super interesting how we implemented that stuff over there and in different parts of the world because that was being used all over the world by the end in Africa and all things, all different countries like that. Can you talk a little bit more about that? About what that meant to the operation over there? Because I think a lot of people, like I said, don't know this part of the story and it's left out of a lot of things and it led to a lot of big things. And when we get to Iraq, we'll talk about really you guys were being sneaky and working as undercovers in some of the operations that you were doing. So can you go a little more into depth about it?
Yeah, I think it's tougher, man. I think it's tougher to do that sneaky Pete type stuff. I mean, it's a lot tougher than doing the sexy DA, breach the door and you're shooting bad guys in the face and all of that. I mean, I think it's tougher developing that intel and painting that picture. And you look at you look at the Bin Laden raid. I think that's probably a great example of the SEALs made that whole thing really sexy by the way they executed that. But if you talk to some of the commanders or some of the guys that were on the ground, it's like, dude, we were hitting harder targets in Iraq and Afghanistan like every night. Like, this wasn't like a really challenging target for us to hit. It just so happened to be the number one target in the flipping world. And they did a great job. I'm not trying to downplay anything, but for people that really know the business and they know what they're looking at, they looked at that Bin Laden raid like, holy cow, man, whoever put that together, they were on their A game, man, because they had to. I mean, that was PhD level manhunting right there. They brought their A game, and that was a tough one. But it's funny that you bring all this up, man, because we had more of the sexy type missions from '06, and that's where a few of the podcasts that I've been on, it's been around the Balkans and the initial infill into Iraq in '03 with Operation Ugly Baby. It's been 2006, specifically April 17th, 2006, my live day, 2 hour daylight firefight in Baghdad in Adamiyah. But really, and not a lot of people have heard about the 2007 rotation, which was all, we were working with Iraqi special ops and we were doing the recce. So we were doing all of the human intelligence, and we were a prolific human intelligence network slash kill capture machine. And we were just ginning up those targets for the guys to go hit every night, sometimes multiple hits every night. And that takes a whole different, that's a crazy amount of work that goes into building those target packages. And I mean, there's just so much that goes into that. And then, we weren't really getting the assets like the national level folks. They get all the great stuff. They get signals intelligence. They got ISR up. Looking at the target for a couple nights. We weren't really getting that. So we were relying on our human network, and we were jetting up tons of targets, man. And that whole rotation. And that's when Petraeus came in, basically took the gloves off, and it's like, hey, we're gonna fight this war and we're gonna win this war. That was, I think, '07 is when we really broke their back. But that's just a very difficult, tough. The targeting and the pattern of life, like we just talked about. I mean, that's a tough business, man. That's a very tough business, very difficult.
But let's take it one step further than that. That's not when it ends. Once that direct action happens, they take that person into custody and bring them back. Then the interrogations begin. And a lot of this was due to your team. There was a lot of stuff that was taken down after those targets were taken down. A lot of follow-on missions, a lot of deep interrogations that were given up other people. And I want to talk about '07, but I want to talk about a couple of these things because I want to show the versatility of you guys. Everyone talks about April 17th, and I want to get into that a little bit because I think that's an important part of your story. But I think these other things are super fascinating. Operation Thor's Hammer. Do you want me to set it up, or do you want to set it up and run through it?
Set it up, please, because it's been a little while since I've.
Okay. So you identified a cell leader, extrajudicial killing punishment cell, Solder City. He's responsible for IED attacks. And then you are going to get him, you're going to set him up. And this is what I mean by the sneak and peek. This stuff is great that you guys were doing that people don't know about. People, I think, on the outside look at this stuff and they go, oh, yeah, it's just helicopters and guns blazing and everything. They don't look at these little secret missions where you're going to set this dude up with a girl. That's how you bring this guy out. So let's talk about that a little, how you guys came up with that and how you executed it.
Yeah, so you're talking about the Dia mission. It's one of my favorite missions. But we had so many different, Thor's Hammer and Loki and all the different ones. So
we're gonna get into them.
Yeah, you definitely got to ask me or set them up for me so I can remember which ones they are. But But for this guy, we had a big, huge whiteboard in our dining room area, which is where we used to eat our meals at Apache. That's where we were at. We were right on the Tigris River, right in Baghdad, northeast of the Green Zone, and we were in a place called Adamia. So we weren't on a huge forward operating base. We were actually located in a few houses, like a compound, and it was Saddam Hussein, a lot of his cronies, and actually a banker or two that kept a lot of his gold. They actually had a vault in one of the basement of the houses. There was no gold when we arrived. I promise you that, because this is '06, so there'd been at least 3 years of previous teams. So I promise you, no gold. But we had this big whiteboard where we had our dinner and we'd have meetings in there and stuff. So you got a bunch of hungry young guys, special forces guys that are trying to get after it. This was a target that was left over from our predecessors. You know how the rotations in Iraq work. We had a fifth special forces group team that was there for 6 to 8 months. We would come in for 6 to 8 months. Fifth group would come back for 6 to 8 months. So on and so forth. So when we got there, we're brand new, fresh, and they plopped a target on our lap, and it was Dia. Hey, this guy's killing Americans. He sets IEDs. He does all these things. And we're like, okay, awesome. Let's go get him. For whatever reason, they couldn't capture him. So you got a bunch of guys that are just sitting around talking like, hey, what could we do? Because at this time, we would be able to get people's phone numbers, but we didn't have the assets that the national level guys had, where they could do all of their stuff with the phone numbers. Like, we didn't have that system. We didn't have the ability to use that. So we had to rely on our human intelligence network and our smarts, our street smarts. So we were thinking like, okay, who is this guy? This is who this guy is. This is how old he is. He probably thinks he's a big deal. He's going around bragging that he's killing people, and he's a gangster, whatever. So just a few of us started talking. We're like, hey, wonder what we could do. What would happen, using the female angle? What would happen if a female would call him? We could say it was accidental, but a female calls him and just goes right for the jugular, using some sexy language right off the bat, like, hey, my husband just left. I miss you so much. I wish you were here. When are you going to be here? That type of thing. Just something to get his attention, and then kind of give a pause and give him time to be like, I think you have the wrong number. Who is this? And then kind of like end it. Have that, whole mystique thing kind of going. And that's basically what we decided. Like, hey, wonder what would happen. We have his phone number. Let's see if one of our female friends from the Iraqi side would be able to give him a call, and we'll see what happens. And that's what we ended up doing. We started developing that relationship. One call went to 2 calls, went to 3 calls, and then they started talking on the phone all the time. And then we set for a meeting. And that's when we decided, like, hey, this is our opportunity to roll this guy up. He thinks he's going to meet this really sexy Iraqi gal who's just been strumming him along this whole time, and we'll be there waiting for him. And that's what ended up happening, man.
Women, it was his downfall.
Women was his downfall, and
Yeah.
he ended up being really smart about that, because we had what we called a bread truck. It was like a close up, like a box truck, and we had a couple sniper guys set up in there. Because honestly, with this guy's background and all the things that he had done, we thought this was, we were probably going to have to kill this guy, is what we thought. And usually you kind of have a good indication. I don't know if that's what it's like for you guys on the law enforcement side, if you're serving like a high risk warrant, or knowing that you're after someone armed. Sometimes you kind of get a feel like, man, this might end up as a shootout. Yeah, could go bad. That we were very strongly leaning that way. Like, this is probably going to go bad. We know this guy's armed, and he's probably going to get killed. That's how we went into the mission. But we had, they were going to meet at like a clothes store. That was going to be their first meeting. And it was going to be right outside Solder City. And keep in mind, this is 2006. This is the 22 February 2006 was when the Samarra Mosque got bombed, and it basically ignited a civil war and we were right there at ground zero of this civil war. And I think it was one of the most deadly time periods for civilians of Iraq out of the whole entire time that we were there. And I think it was like the third deadliest, most violent year for American soldiers. But I mean, it's bad, man. It's violent. It's deadly. It's a bad time period, and we basically, Solder City, which we were right outside Solder City, was basically a no-go zone for a good while for American soldiers. But we had this whole place locked down, and keep in mind, we're in like an SUV in civilian clothes, and I sent
Just
over a
roving,
picture.
right?
We're roving around. I was wearing like a green tracksuit, like a top. It had Iraq, but
I'll put the
yeah,
picture up. I have the picture of it. So
yeah, it's a good picture. But we're roving around, and we just couldn't get this guy inside the store, and our folks that are reporting, it's like, hey, we don't see anybody, but we know they're going back and forth on the phone, back and forth, back and forth. But we finally located him. He was outside the store. He was actually being smart. He felt something was a little off, and he was trying to get her to leave the store to come to him. But of course, she wouldn't do it because she wasn't there. But by the time this whole thing worked out, we ended up parking, and I went and grabbed the dude and threw him down, and that was a great start to our rotation, man. We got a great bit of intelligence off of him, and it really started things for us, man. It was a great mission.
well, it really slowed down the IEDs against coalition forces by taking him, the interrogations like we talked about in the aftermath, and then the follow-ons that came with it. Let's talk
Yeah,
about you guys collecting up a couple vehicles, about 13 of them during Operation Loki. You
that's all you needed
had
to say. I'm tracking.
okay.
Yeah,
Do I need to set
yeah.
this one up? Or are you good?
I'm good. I'm good. You say the vehicles. So actually, there's a great picture out there of one of my colleagues from Kerrville, Texas. His name's Ryan Land. Actually, he's the guy in the picture with me when I'm wearing my green Iraqi
Okay.
tracksuit. But there's a great picture of Ryan. If I could find it, I'll get it over to you. But he's on some kind of souped up street bike, motorcycle type thing. It's kind of funny, and he was wheeling it off the car lot. So we were after a guy. We knew he owned a car lot right outside Solder City. So we developed a ruse that, hey, we're going to go hit this car lot, and we're going to play dumb Americans, and we're going to say that we're looking for so and so. Totally different name, made up name, some Iraqi dude. So we were going to show up, talk to his workers, and say, hey, we're here for this dude. This is who we want. And we were hoping they would say, that guy doesn't own this car lot. This is a big misunderstanding. This is not the guy. And it's like, well, okay, well, who's the guy that owns the car lot? Let's talk to him. We'll clear this whole thing up, and everybody be about their day. We can go home. We're safe. You guys do your stuff. So that was kind of like what we were after. Was we were trying to set that whole thing up. So we went to the car lot, and we started talking to the folks there, and they kind of played dumb with everything.
Can
Yeah,
I interrupt you for just a second? Can you
yeah.
explain to the general public what an Iraqi car lot looks like? Because I have a feeling it doesn't look the same as a Chevrolet dealership here.
No, it actually did. I mean, it was
Really?
used cars. Yeah, yeah, man. Yeah, yeah, for sure. It was like what you would see. Okay, let me tell you this. Something that you would see like outside of a military installation
Okay,
where they're
okay,
trying to,
okay. Now
yeah, and
I'm
they're
tracking
all,
with you, but yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Okay,
yeah, they're
I,
all
I
they're
get
all
it.
used cars, and they're all overpriced, and the
They're
people in there,
twenty-five
they're
percent
straight.
interest, and it's pay
It's
cash up
where
front.
used
Right.
car salesman comes from. Like, yeah,
Right.
yeah. So, I mean, there was actually a bunch of cars there, and we ended up talking to those guys, and they kind of played dumb about it, and they didn't give anything up. So we were like, all right, well, we're going to start confiscating these vehicles, and they were like, what? It's like, we're going to start confiscating these vehicles, and when we leave here, we're taking all the vehicles with us. And then that's when they really panicked. They were just like, oh gosh, because I think the way it works in Iraq, there's kind of like a little drug deal going on, and the way the money is exchanged and the vehicles exchanged, like, they're kind of trusting this guy, like, hey, I want you to sell my car, and then I'm going to get all this money back. And if my car disappears, then so we ended up confiscating all the cars, which took us and our Iraqi soldiers, our Iraqi special ops dudes that we were with. And I was with one of my partner teams, Matt Gerard. So we had two ODAs and some Iraqi special op guys. And we ended up confiscating all of their vehicles. And then we just told them, like, hey, this is who we are. We got all your cars. If you guys want to make this thing right, we'll figure it out. And if not, then you're never going to see these cars again. You guys are going to have to deal with it. Which that created an absolute shitstorm, man, amongst all the bad guys. So we were getting word back through our human intelligence network that the pressure was on this guy. He had to go into hiding, so it interrupted all of his terrorist activity for a little while, and guys were after him because they thought he was shady. And so yeah, I mean, not every single time you eliminate a target and it's like, okay, he's gone. Sometimes there's other ways that you can affect things. And I think that was a great example, and it took some creativity. And, we actually had guys come out of the woodwork uh, that were calling. And I think our company headquarters, because we took everything back to the green zone. And I think our company headquarters, they were getting calls from all over the place. They were like, hey, this is so and so from the State Department, and the ambassador's chief bodyguard's little brother had his Pinto over there. We were getting all these weird calls and all that type of stuff. But yeah, overall, man, it was a very successful but creative mission for sure.
And that's more of just putting news out in the streets. That's just letting the streets know your business because they're listening. So I
Oh
think
yeah.
that was an amazing one. Operation Parliament. Now this one was a time sensitive one, and a female Iraqi parliament member was abducted. So do I need to set this one up anymore, or do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about for that one. So yeah, you're right. It was a time sensitive target, and we didn't have a lot of time to plan. We got intelligence of where she was located, and this is once again right over there by Solder City, which is absolute just nightmare of an area. A lot of IEDs. We knew we were going into a tough spot, and we didn't, because it was time sensitive. We really didn't have the time to plan it all out, and we were limited. I mentioned earlier we didn't have capability for signals intelligence. That was different assets. We also didn't have helicopter support, even though for Parliament that wouldn't have really helped us. Just trying to
Wait
paint
a
the
minute.
picture a little bit
Wait
more.
a minute. Wait a minute. Special Forces ODA did not have helicopter assets.
Most don't, man. That's a higher level asset. Like we were, we were a small ODA out in the city. Like that wasn't an asset that we had. Now, could that be something that we requested months out and try to plan for? Yeah, of course. Uh, but
I,
like
I
when you
think
think
that's
of
I think that's like news to people though, because I mean, you would agree when they look at it from the outside, they think, of course, you have all these assets. You're special forces. You have and I want people to understand
it's not
how
like that.
deep in the shit you guys were. I mean, you guys were buried in it out there.
Yeah, we really were, man. I mean, we were the last, in '06 when the Civil War ignited. Baghdad was pretty much, a Sunni area. And, the Shia had just pushed everyone out. They had taken over Baghdad and Adamiyah, which is a suburb of Baghdad. Adamiyah was the last Sunni stronghold. So we were right across from Adamiyah. We were really close to Sadr City, which was basically a Shia slum that was basically a no-go area for us a lot of times. But we were just in the middle of a complete shit show. But we didn't have those assets. Like, we didn't have anywhere for helicopters. Now, when people think of like SEAL Team 6 or Delta and some of those national level assets, they have those things, they have those capabilities. But for a normal ODA, that's not a typical asset. Like that's unheard of. But anyway, time sensitive target. We didn't really have a lot of time to plan. We were gonna drive in. We were able to link up with our coalition forces, and we had some tank support, and they were willing. They were down. Tankers were down. Like, hey, let's do this. And we were like, hey guys, you know, yes, you can be there and be in some kind of supporting capacity, but if we have you anywhere close to the target, man, I mean, we're going to burn the target before we even get there. So
Yeah,
we pushed the
tends
tank.
to happen with
Yeah,
a tank.
yeah. So we pushed the tanks back, but it kind of it comes full circle. Um, so we had a general location where the female Iraqi parliament member was, and we ended up. I think we're about 400 or 500 meters from the target building. We hit an IED. Yeah, so we get about 400 or 500 meters from the target building, and lead vehicle hits an IED, and it's a moment of pause for I'm in the third vehicle. It's a moment of pause for me trying to it's like, wow, we just got hit with an IED. This is terrible. Um, our lead vehicle is the vehicle that got hit, and saw the gunner get thrown out of the turret, and he was injured, so we needed to get some medical treatment his way. And it seemed like a minute or so, but it must have only been a couple seconds. Got that going on, and at that time we knew we were compromised. It was basically an early warning: don't get closer. They knew it was going to slow us down, and as soon as I got out of my vehicle and made sure our medical team was straight, I was like, man, get those tanks up here. Let's see what we can do. And of course, we ended up hitting a dry hole, but the mission wasn't lost. I'm not able to get into specifics of how everything went down, but the folks that kidnapped the good female Iraqi parliament member, they obviously knew that we were coming, and that we almost recovered her, but we were able to get word through our network that it might be a better idea to go ahead and maybe release her instead of going down this road, because it wasn't
Yeah.
going to end well.
You bring up the gunner's turret in that. You and I had talked before the show tonight, and we had discussed a picture that you had sent me about the gunner's turret, and that you, once again, I'm going to go back to it's all about the team. You had taken up positions in that, a very vulnerable position in your team, to sometimes go in the gunner's turret. When you guys are running around without having the assets that a lot of people think that you guys had, without having the ability to kind of get what you need as you need it, how do you face it differently than I think a lot of people think that you face what's happening? Am I making sense when I ask that question?
How did we face it?
Yeah, well, so like when you're getting ready to go out and do it, when you're running these missions, when you're doing all these different things and you don't have these assets and stuff like that, how do you guys look at each other to where you step up and you go into the gunner's turret, or you say, I'll do this because I know it's super dangerous and I don't want you to have to do it again? Or how do you guys approach that as a team effort and as leaders, because you were a leader in that group?
Well, you bring up a great point, and you bring up a really complex, tricky situation that kind of just typically gets swept under the rug, and no one really has a good understanding. So to understand where we were at Apache, basically these are, like I said earlier, these are like houses. This is not a huge forward operating bases where we have thousands of people and every imaginable asset that you can imagine. Like, we don't have that. So we have a compound that we still are responsible for defending. Yes, we had help. We had Iraqis that helped us, but who were in charge, of the Iraqis was our guys.
Right.
So, and a lot of people don't realize that in combat, there's a lot of administrative things that you have to do. Like, you still had to do meetings, and there's, targeting meetings, and, you have to do face to face with your command, your higher headquarters, and you need to make sure you're getting food and fuel. I mean, there's a lot of things that you have to do administratively. So for us, it was even more challenging because we still had a compound that we couldn't just roll out every American and leave
Right.
Iraqis there. So we had to leave part of our team to make sure our base defense was set and we could actually protect our compound. And then we had to take a portion of our team to do our meetings and our administrative runs. So I took that upon myself. Like if our vehicle was leaving our base, I was there because I felt that was my job as the team sergeant, was to make sure that in my eyes that was the most dangerous, even though being an Apache was ridiculously dangerous and we got hit often. AK-47, PKM machine gun, RPGs, Katusha rockets. I mean, dude, everything. We had everything. We got hit with everything there over and
Well,
over. Typically, when it was nighttime, we got hit. But so it was a dangerous place, but it was also very dangerous being on the roads and driving. So typically daylight, it was like, man, if vehicles were leaving our compound with Green Berets, I was in that vehicle. And I felt that it was my duty to share that responsibility, to share that danger with my team. I wanted them to see like, hey, I'm not scared to be up in the gun. I'm going to gun. That's our most vulnerable, exposed position. If we get hit with an IED, the gunner's probably dead or missing limbs. So I wanted to share that with my team. I wanted to know that I wanted them to know that I was prepared to shoulder that burden right alongside with them, and we would take turns. I wasn't always gunning, but I would definitely take turns up there. I would take turns driving. I would take turns sitting, in the main seat, the TC seat. So I just thought it was important, and it was a way for me to tell my team that I trusted them. Hey, Big D's up in the gun, and he trusts you guys to do the right thing and go to the right areas and drive and navigate through the streets of Baghdad. And it was a trust thing. So, and I felt that was great team building and confidence.
well, and I bring it up for the simple fact that you didn't have to do that. Like that wasn't a thing that you had to do. And when we very first
No,
started talking about service and selfless service to others, and the reason I brought it up, I mean, I know that it was in while we're talking about a mission, but it reminded me to talk about that, you being up in the gunner and how important that was to you. With all of these missions that you guys are doing, especially the ones that you guys are doing where it's these sneak and peeks, you guys have to trust each other immensely with everything's going on because these are categorically not conventional. They are as unconventional gets. And I think that there is, and you would have to tell me because you were there, there's a different level of trust. And I get it. You trust the guy to your left and to your right. But when you're talking about the stuff you guys are doing, it's a way deeper trust. Would you agree?
yeah, definitely, because the way that we rolled, we rolled in two vehicles, two up armored vehicles, and we typically our typical package on any given day, we would have three Green Berets in each vehicle. So if you could just imagine this, DJ, it's almost unheard of to see two vehicles driving around in Iraq in 2006, height of the Civil War, most dangerous time period of the war, and we're in the flipping center of gravity in Baghdad,
Right.
and people's eyeballs would be like the size of saucers when they would see us drive by and there's only two vehicles. They were like, "Oh my gosh, what are these people doing? Who are these people?"
How are you dressed typically?
So that was another fun thing that we did. So we had our kit, we had our helmets, and we had our body armor and all that type of stuff. We had chest rigs, but we typically, we were kitted out and we had desert tops. We typically wore desert tops unless we were doing missions. And if we were doing, missions that we had planned for, we were wearing desert flight suits. Actually, had some pretty cool pictures of us, wearing the flight suits, even though they're a little hot, in the summer Baghdad. So if you saw us in a vehicle, you would see special ops soldiers, but we typically wore jeans or some type of cargo pants. And here's the reason why, because there was a method to the madness. Now, if we were doing an administrative run and we are doing some type of logistic type stuff, maybe we were going to the PX and we were, stocking up on DVDs and movies and, whatever, some kind of entertainment just to take your mind off things for a little bit. We would typically leave someone in our two vehicles to watch the vehicles. We would take off our kit, take off our helmet, take off our chest rig, body armor, take off our desert top, and wearing a polo like I'm wearing right now. And then I get out of that up armored vehicle and I'm wearing jeans and boots and a polo. And I look like just every other, especially I have a beard. So I look like every other contractor with my ball cap and my sunglasses on. I look like every other triple canopy Blackwater contractor that's on the big bases back in Iraq. So that way we didn't have to worry about Big Sarge, what we called Big Sarge, clearing our pistols and doing all that type of nonsense, or why we're wearing ball caps, or why we're, our sleeves are rolled up, or wiring our our boots blouse, all the stupid ridiculousness that the soldiers had to deal with over there. We didn't play that game. That's the way we avoided that. Small victories, man. Small victory.
Absolutely. And as long as, we're talking about it, with as many combat deployments as you're doing, those small victories start to add up into big victories.
Man, because it's good. It's good for morale for sure.
Let's talk about Operation Omega. And it's the last one that I want to talk about. Now, these guys that you're looking for, they're Almaty leaders. They're responsible for abductions, executions, attacks on coalition forces. There's a terrorist cell leader that was at a gas station, and they were screening customers like you talked about to see whether they were Sunni or Shia there. You guys got together. You devised this daytime operation that you're going to do, and you're going to try and roll this dude up and figure out what's going on. So is that enough setting up, or do you want me to give a couple more?
No, that's perfect.
That's okay.
Perfect. So another thing, too, I want to highlight is daylight. We did a lot of daylight missions, and you always hear everybody talk about the military owns the night. We have night observation devices that the enemy, doesn't have that capability. So it's like, hey, why would we fight anybody during the day when we're giving up so many advantages, so many capabilities, But we had to rely on what we had, and it was hard. We're using this network. And it's hard, I think probably the majority of the time that we were there in Baghdad, there was a curfew. So for us to have one of our Iraqi human folks that was helping us, let's say for this instance, being a trigger, which basically means, I don't know if this is what law enforcement calls it or not, but that's what we called it. We had a trigger where we had someone that was in the vicinity of the gas station serving as our trigger. And as soon as they called us, let us know, hey, so-and-so is at the gas station. This is a quick description. That served as our trigger. Once we got that trigger, we were rolling, man. Is that familiar to you?
Yeah,
DJ?
I don't know that I've heard the word trigger being used, but you have someone in close contact with what's going on. But as things develop, they kind of roll out of the scene.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, they kind of melt away, man. They melt away.
Yeah, pre-op surveillance, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, so once again, we went back to our bread truck package, and we loaded up the team in the back. And what is not so funny about this bread truck is I fell out of this bitch not once, but twice. Back in the green zone, we were back at our company headquarters, and we did a little bit of prep. We did a little bit of rehearsals. And of course, you can't have a white dude driving this vehicle. So we used one of our interpreters who, was obviously Iraqi, but he wasn't that familiar with the truck. So the first time he kind of got me by surprise, and I didn't realize that we were getting ready to take off, and he started up and gunned it, and I fell out the flipping back. So everyone got a great laugh once they realized I wasn't
absolutely
hurt. So we creeped up about 5 meters. I ended up getting back in the truck. Everyone had a great laugh. I was like, okay, that's awesome. You guys
it's a great way
hilarious.
To start an operation, though. You're pissed off the rest of the operation.
It really is. And I wasn't like a superstitious guy, DJ, But I'm kind of thinking like, man, this op isn't starting off that great. Like, I've already fell out of this thing. Like, am I going to get shot or blown up on this thing? Like, I'm not off to a great start. But then he kind of tinkers around with the vehicle and he kind of goes smooth. And for whatever reason, I don't know why, but he kind of went smooth for a little bit. And I think I was trying to adjust my kit or my gear. And then he flipping slams on the brakes or guns it again. I forget which one. But I ended up flying out the back again for the second time. So by this point, luckily I'm not hurt either time, besides my pride and my ego, because all the guys are hysterically laughing. That camaraderie on a team is just, dark humor. And it's like, hey, are you
Absolutely.
okay? Yes, I'm fine. It's like, oh, then everyone just hysterical, laughing like a bunch of hyenas. It's crazy. But anyway, that's kind of the start. That's a little background for you. But we finally figured it out. So we're in the back of a truck. We ended up closing the door when we started rolling. And just keep in mind, this is daylight. There's not a lot going on. We lose a lot of our advantages when we're doing these daylight hits. But we had a good trigger. We felt good about it. We trusted our Iraqi that was out there on the ground. What we did was we had a couple of vehicles, up armored vehicles, that was trailing our truck at a good clip. But if we needed them, they would be right there. So we got up to the gas station and we rolled out the back. And I was going to be one of the first guys out. And I was using this as kind of a leadership development for my guys because I believe it was toward the end. And I was like, you know what? I'll be left because normally I'm like, as the guy, I'm like with the center element that's gonna really be right there, actions on. So I was like, you know what, I'm gonna be left side security. So I'm gonna roll out first. I'm gonna set up left side security. The next couple guys are gonna go out. They're gonna set up right side security. Then the rest of the team, with one of my younger guys leading, which I would normally be, they're going to go right toward the center and get the bad guy, call it a day.
So let's break this down real quick. Let's just
Yeah.
recap before we finish. You've fallen out of a truck twice. You're not
Yeah.
superstitious, but know something's up. You decide to take
Yeah.
this mission as a not normal mission and take left instead of center and just a security position instead of the team lead. I just want to make sure everyone's following how much you have started out this mission and what you're really headed towards.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. But it just so happened, me and my partner, whoever it was, I can't remember, but we ran to our spot. And the guy, what, like, you think of the gas station, you got the pumps, and then you got like the little store where there's items for sale, and the guy that's doing the cash register and all that type of stuff. But where me and my partner ended up was right where our target was, like right there. Like, I ran right into the dude. It was like 5 seconds. I mean, 5 seconds we had jackpot. And I mean, it's like the main element, like, we hadn't even got to their location yet. And I'm calling jackpot. Like, hey, we got it, dude. Jackpot. Two dudes, we got a whole team of pipe hitters there, like, ready to just punch people in the face and take action. I say that kind of in jest, not literally. Within seconds, we have jackpot, successful mission. Throw the guy in the back of the truck. Everybody loads back up. They're like, "What the heck just happened? What, D? Did you set that up, man?" And I was like, "No, dude. It's just the way it went down. It's where I went. The guy was there. I grabbed him and threw his ass in the back of the truck, and we rolled out of there, man. It was so smooth. But that sounds like really cool. But there's a lot of planning and trust. I think kind of things that we were talking about earlier that go into those type of things where you can look at your guys and say, "Hey, man, I trust you. I know that you'll do the right thing," and all that type of stuff. But yeah, man, that was a fun op, good memories.
Yeah, well, falling out of a truck twice and then finding jackpot, with just you and another
It
guy.
made up for it.
You might, yeah,
It made
but you
up for
might
it.
have tried that, a couple more times. All right, so what did those guys mean to you, and what did they mean to your career?
Yeah, it was definitely the pinnacle. It was the highlight. a lot of guys say that, like being a team sergeant, leading a special forces operational detachment alpha in combat, that is the pinnacle. You can continue on and do a lot of other great things, but there's nothing like leading a 12-man operational detachment alpha in combat. And I would like just to kind of one up that a little bit. There's nothing like leading a 12-man special forces operational detachment alpha and being the best. Like, for 10th group, they have the Larry Torney Award, and it's for the best special forces operational detachment in 10th group. At this time, this is 2006, so there's only 3 battalions. So you're thinking, there's 54 teams, 54 special forces teams in 10th group, 54 12-man teams. And we were voted the best team in all of 10th Special Forces Group for all of the great things that the guys did in 2006. I was just lucky enough and fortunate enough to be the team sergeant of that great group of dudes. And these were all blue collar dudes. These were young guys. They were hungry. They were eager. They were aggressive. We had a motto that we try to stick to: speed, surprise, violence of action, overwhelming firepower. And we try to use our aggressiveness to our advantage. We look for opportunities where other teams, were hesitant or scared of the threats. We viewed those as opportunities. Like, hey, let's get out, and maybe somebody will be dumb enough that they'll shoot at us today, and we can obliterate them. So we were like apex predators, man. That's what we tried to be, that rotation. So that was my guys. I was very fortunate to lead them into combat, and we had a great rotation. We were probably one of the most decorated teams that year too. I believe we had 3 Bronze Stars with Valor, a bunch of Bronze Stars, which whatever. But we had 3 Bronze Stars with Valors. I think we had 3 Arcoms with
You did.
Valors. I mean, we were a very, very valorous unit, highly decorated, best team. I was fortunate enough because of the performance of my guys, the Frederick Award, which that was the
Top operator.
that was the top operator award for 2006. I was fortunate. I think you can actually see that. That's that award right there. So yeah, man, the guys mean they mean everything to me. They still do. We had a great rotation in '07, which hopefully later on some of those exploits, because we had some crazy missions from that time period. And I think as I continue on my podcast journey, we'll probably start venturing into the '07 things, because we really burnt Iraq down even more than we did in '06. But yeah, the guys mean a lot. I would like to mention Dave Roten. He started out as a young guy on my team, and unfortunately, he was killed in Afghanistan in 2014 as a contractor. So just to kind of give you a little context about Dave, you've heard me talk about, we had the best team. That's true. We did. It was a fact. We had the best team in 10th group in 2006. Well, we had our own award, our own internal award, and it was called the Hard Hitter Award, and it was given out every single week, and it was a big, huge sledgehammer. And if you happen, and none of the leadership the leadership wasn't eligible. So myself, our team warrant, and our team leader, our captain, we weren't eligible for the Hard Hitter Award, but we could vote on the Hard Hitter Award. So it was voted upon your peers and the leadership team. And every single week, a guy would be voted for the Hard Hitter Award. And they would be able to decorate it or write something on it, or, glue something, whatever. But Dave Roten was our guy that was the hard hitter. He won the hard hitter the most that whole entire rotation. We were there 8 months. So for us to be the best team in 10th Special Forces Group, Dave was the best and top operator from our team. And he was a phenomenal operator. And when his time came, he answered the call. They got hit with a VBIED at his compound in Afghanistan. They breached the gate. They sent people through. Dave and his teammates eliminated those threats on the ground, and then they were getting hit from the rooftop. And Dave had a 203, so he had a grenade launcher on his rifle. So they called for Dave to come to the rooftop to help with the threat that was just hammering the rooftop. And unfortunately, when Dave got to the rooftop, he was shot and killed. But he was a phenomenal dude. I think people, if you've ever given someone, if you've ever given a eulogy, or if you've ever passed an American flag to someone, I think you would feel differently and feel strongly about our country. I know that I have, and I wear a bracelet. I wear a bracelet for Dave. I can't go into detail much more than this one little saying here, but I will say that Dave will be remembered and honored for the remainder of time. He will be a star. He is a star. He will never be forgotten.
Well, and we're even going to add his photo in with yours for your episode this week, and I think it's an important story that people get out there, because once again, like we talked about with the Balkans and things like that, these undercover operations, people don't hear about stuff like that. Once they're gone away from the army or whatever, you don't hear their stories maybe carried forward because of whatever company they may be working for or whatever it may be. You don't hear those stories. So I'm glad that you took the time to talk about that.
No, I was going to say thank you so much for allowing me to talk about it, because I think for the families it's important. You don't want you know you don't want the name forgotten. You want to be able to say that name and to celebrate that life. And I'm terribly sad that we've lost Dave, but man, he went out guns a blazing. And if you're gonna have to go out, man, he went out guns a blazing. Man, he went out guns a blazing.
Well, and it's an amazing story, and I know how much that story and how much he means to you. That kind of brings us into the next thing. So you reach the pinnacle there. You have a great rotation in '07, but then '08 through 16, you're assigned to the Special Warfare School, correct?
Yeah, I spent 4 years at the schoolhouse, and I was an online instructor for advanced non-commissioned officer course, which was definitely plush and easy and simple. Not being operational kind of hurt at the same time, but that's when I was doing my single dad time. And then the special forces community in the military graciously allowed me to homestead at Fort Bragg and spend another 4 years of staff, because typically you go away from your operational assignment for 3 or 4 years and you kind of catch a break, and then you go back to your team or your group and you're operational again and you start deploying. That's typically the way it works. But because of my status as a single dad, and I'd been operational for 10 years straight, 10 rotations and all that, they allowed me to homestead and be a single dad and take care of my kids. So I'm definitely grateful for that opportunity.
The reason I bring that up, because you took kind of a different turn at the end of your special operations career. You got to homestead. You said that you're, not deploying and things like that. So you get to slow down the engines a little bit before you retire. I'm not saying you completely slow down, but you definitely are getting to see a different side of it. You're getting to see that dad side and all. But I've got to wonder, whenever it's all over, when it comes to the end, 17, you retire, you step away from this career, this life. You've had a little time to slow the engines down, like we said, but you're stepping away. And what we talked about in the very beginning, this is all you've known your whole life. I mean, your whole adult life has been deployed, has been in combat areas, has been doing everything that you were doing, sometimes shooting bad guys in the face. All of these things build over time. So when you step away from it, being that single dad, you step away from this life, you got to tell me your mind state, because I have a feeling that even with the slowdown, everything's got to come to like a screeching halt the day you step away.
Yeah, it did. I was actually lucky though, because I was actually able to start working while I was doing my transition. So
So you skill
because
bridged.
typically the army, yeah, I was able to do some of that. because I've been in so long. Typically, the last year is kind of like, hey, get your physicals done. You're on your own. Do college or do whatever. I mean, I already had my college finished up, so I was fortunate enough. I was able to start working in July of 16. My official retirement was January 2017. So I started working, surprisingly enough, at the Museum of the Bible. It was under construction up in Washington, D.C. 430,000 square foot brand new museum, $550 million. Just an incredible museum. And I would have never thought in a million years that that would have been my transition from being a Green Beret Special Forces to working at the Museum of the Bible. But that's what I ended up doing. You have to provide for your family, and you still have to pay the bills. And I ended up doing that for a few years. But it definitely was a huge transition. It was a huge transition to go from Fort Bragg to DC, especially during this time period. I mean, this is 2016, and it's the Clinton Trump. And I'm not trying to get political. I'm just telling you, going from North Carolina military installation type space
Yeah.
to DC, and then of course how everything kind of played out. DC was just a different animal for me. But yeah, I felt like at times like, man, this is very different. These are very different people. I was trying to get used to having like 20 people on the same email. I didn't understand that at first, and now it doesn't really bother me that much. But little small things like that. I just use an example. It's like I remember being a brand new civilian person. And it's like, why is this person asking me something very simple that I can take care of, but they're putting like 20 people on the email just to make sure that their supervisors and their supervisor knows that they asked this question and it's going to get handled. Like, it's so weird to me.
It's got to be a foreign world. Now, what I want to ask though is, did the post traumatic anything come from it? Everything that you had seen over all those years, did it ever make itself known to you, or did you do pretty good at staving it off?
Oh yeah, that's a great question, man. It's a deep question. It's a great question, but yeah, man, I did have some problems. You have to compartmentalize so much, especially Baghdad. I mean, it was just such a violent place, and there's so much violence and death that you have to deal with. And I think I compartmentalized a lot of that, but at some point it starts coming back up and you have to deal with it. And toward the end, and you start doing all your physicals. And I went to a clinic, a TBI, traumatic brain injury clinic, Intemperate Spirit is what they call it at Fort Bragg, is one of the clinics. And I went there because it was on my list. Like, I had to go to the traumatic brain injury clinic. And yeah, I had to go through all the stuff, and I thought they were just going to be like, hey, you're good to go, thanks a lot. But they were like, hey man, so you have headaches, and tell us a little bit about some of your head injuries, and how often have you been around explosions and RPG blasts and rockets, mortars, all these IEDs. And it was just like, well, shoot, how much time do you have? We'll talk about
Right.
it. But yeah, so I left there and it's like, well, wow, I have something wrong here. I have traumatic brain injury, and I was taking magnesium, I was taking trazodone, I think, and taking a bunch of stuff. And then I started really, contemplating, like, do I want to continue? Like, is there another alternative? Can I do something else to try to help with these headaches and things like that? And for me, I found that exercise and fitness. I mean, I'm a straight up work in product. I'm a work in progress.
I think you and I were talking on the phone one day. Do you have a treadmill in your office?
I don't have one in my office. I have one in my garage, and
Were
I'm
you
typically
were
on
you
it a
on the
bunch.
treadmill when we were talking one morning?
Yeah, I think that really does a lot for me, man. It helps me. You got a good memory. But yeah, man, I think, and we do these walking challenges at work, and I think my colleagues at work think I'm crazy because it's like, how does one guy get 20,000 steps a day? Like, do you put your Fitbit on like your dog or something? And let the dog run around. But it's like,
He
I
takes
think
his
for
phone
me,
calls in the morning on the treadmill. That's how he gets 20,000 steps.
that's what I tell people. I say, hey man, before I really even come into the office, I'm already setting at 10. So, and then the rest of the day is all gravy. I just try to be active, but I do think that's something for me, for my mental well being. If I could ever like really zero that in and get my whole fitness strategy, I could be probably a machine. But right now, I think where I'm at, it helps my mental well being and the treadmill, and I have an elliptical now, man. I have a secret weapon. I just got an elliptical, so maybe you won't hear that. It won't be as loud if we're talking on the phone in the morning, but yeah, I have had to deal with some of those things, man. There's some traumatic things. There's some just unspeakable things that you see or do in combat that you just have to live with. And I think everyone has their own journey and how they process that and how they deal with it. But DJ, you know this as well as I do, but our community is hurting, and I hope that by I think it's so honorable what you're doing, DJ, and I appreciate it. Have a lot of appreciation for what you're doing because you know I think our generation, DJ, we probably grew up reading books a little bit more, or
Okay.
paperbacks, and this is a different generation. So this generation, they're listening to podcasts and things like that, and that's why I think it's so honorable what you're doing, because maybe there's some folks out there that are struggling and are having a tough time, and they hear guys like me and guys like some of your other guests out there that are listening in to your great podcast, and maybe it helps some of their coping strategies. And there's different ways that folks can handle it, and I know there's a lot of people out there in the community doing great things to help, but man, we have to do something that can help out some of our veterans that are really hurting, and all of the suicides, and you know pick up the phone, stop by. And actually, I read a LinkedIn post the other day. Someone said, hey, don't tell people to call or text or email, like just stop by and say, hey, I'm here, what can I do to help you? So we have to be more proactive, and we have to wrap our arms around our veterans. They did everything for us, and they didn't turn their back, so we can't turn our back on them.
I think it goes more to a point with you because of what you're doing now with the Medal of Honor Museum. You can't ever kind of step away. You don't ever get to take a break from that military service, because what you guys are doing is honoring that and taking those legacies and stories forward. And that's a super important thing with the museum and everything that we've talked about that you guys are going to do at the museum, everything that's going to be there and available to people. You're going to continue to hear those stories over and over. And that's why I kind of ask you about how you process through it, because I can't help to think, when you're still in that environment, which you very much are, and around these soldiers and around these stories, there's going to be trigger points for you where you're going to hear a story and think back to something that happened to you. And we have to make sure that guys like you stay strong for all the ones that are listening in, the ones that are trying to figure it out by looking at a guy like you that was around forever, that's still continuing the fight in what you're doing and going, oh, yeah, it does suck, but it does get better. There's a grind, but it does get better. And I think you would agree with that, that it does get better at some point. You just kind of have to figure out what that new mission and purpose is. And I think that's what we talk about a lot on this show is mission and purpose. Like, get done what you need to get done. You can be a whole second person after you step away from that life.
Yeah, for sure, man, for sure. And that's what I feel so fortunate about having this opportunity to work at the National Medal of Honor Museum Foundation, is to have that great mission and purpose, and to be around the recipients. I tell a bunch of people all the time, a lot of my colleagues, I spent 26 and a half years in the military. I was only ever around one recipient, and that was Bob Howard, Mac VSOG. You just heard all of this when we were talking with our Mac VSOG
I did,
buddy,
but let people
John.
know.
Yeah, but I was only it's very rare. Like, you just don't get a chance to see and spend time with Medal of Honor recipients, and I think it's important for people to have that opportunity and to spend some time, because I would say there's a 99.99% chance that if you ever get a chance to spend some time around a recipient, or to read about a recipient, or to hear about a recipient, that you will be inspired, because these are just some phenomenal people. And I think one thing that's interesting too is, people are going to learn that these were ordinary people that did extraordinary things. And they're a lot just like us, they have fears and they get hurt and they have pain and all of these other type of things. These are ordinary people that did extraordinary things. They have fascinating stories. And I think that we can use their stories in our everyday lives, because as humans, we all struggle, right? We all have issues, we all have problems, and it's how you deal with these things, how you get through these things. And I think we can learn some valuable lessons from the recipients, no doubt in my mind.
All right, let's talk about the foundation, what the museum's going to be, and what it's going to mean to the veteran community and to the general population that's out there that wants to see things like this.
Yeah, yeah. So the foundation, the National Medal of Honor Museum Foundation, it's a three-pronged project. There's going to be a museum and an institute, a leadership institute that's co-located in Arlington, Texas, that will be opening early 2025. And then there's also the third part of the project is a monument, a national monument for Medal of Honor recipients that will be built in Washington, D.C. on the National Mall. That's probably going to be 2026. So yeah, we're really excited about it for the institute, the education piece. There's three centers of impact at the institute. There's the Center of Character Excellence. There's a Center of Leadership and Action, and then the Center of Elevating Honor. So we have the youth, we have adult, we have like a think tank that'll all be covered there. The museum. When you think of most museums, I think you probably think a little boring, or it's going to be like a history lesson. And we do have some tough content that we're going to cover. We realize that, but I think probably most people would maybe think it's going to be more of like a chronological type of museum. Like you walk into the exhibit deck and you start with the Civil War, because the first medals of honor were awarded in 1863 during the Civil War. And then you're going to start from the Civil War, and then you're going to walk around, a box or a circle, and then you're going to end up at GWAT with the Medal of Honor recipients from Iraq and Afghanistan. But that's not what we're going to be. We're not going to be a chronological museum. We're going to be more of a biography museum, stories, these great, rich stories of these recipients, and the values that are embodied in these Medal of Honor recipients. And we talk about six: courage, sacrifice, commitment, integrity, citizenship, patriotism, and how we're sharing those values with the folks that are going to be visiting, and how important those things are. And one of the recipients that I talk about probably more than any other, Master Sergeant Roy Benavidez, MACV-SOG from 1968. This man's life, the way he grew up, and the problems that he had to overcome. He was a poor student. He was an orphan. He was discriminated against because he was, Indian, Mexican, heritage. His time, the man still loved his country and wanted to serve. He wanted to serve others. And he was injured so severely. They said he would never walk again. He taught himself to walk. He ended up.
But didn't you say he threw himself out of the bed onto the floor so he would?
That was our friend John.
Was that John?
That was John. But yeah, he did. I've read. Actually, I have it over my shoulder there. You can see. I have the book Legend, where it talks about his recovery, where he was sneaking out of bed and throwing himself on the floor and out of the chairs so he could force himself to learn to walk. But the power of this man and his mental strength, just off the charts. But ended up going through Special Forces training and doing another tour in Vietnam. And May of '68 is when his Medal of Honor action was, where he went in with with basically nothing. I think he went in with like a bag and like a K-bar. He didn't even have his weapon, and it was basically a NVA regiment, 700 some people against 12 guys. Just an absolute hero. The things that he endured, and a lot of the things about Roy too were the things that he did after his action, with the talking to the schools and educating and things like that. Just a remarkable human being, and I can't wait to share. Our museum shares the stories of his action and the things that he did in his life. I think it will definitely be inspiring.
When do you guys open? And what can people expect other than what we've talked about, where it's not really going to be it's not going to be your normal museum. I know we've talked about how you're going to set it up and it's going to be the stories, but what can people expect when they get there? Because if you've seen the pictures like you send to me every week of the construction and stuff, it does not look like what you think this kind of museum would be about. You think it would be very rigid, but it's very flowing. It's a beautiful museum. What can people expect when they see it, when it opens, and when does it open?
Yeah, the architecture is great. I mean, it's gonna, like, the symbology behind the building and the meaning of things and the mega columns. You know, we have five mega columns that represent each branch of service that we have a Medal of Honor recipient from. And I know that we have six branches of service now, but our Space Force branch, we don't have a Medal of Honor recipient from our Space Force branch. But there's a lot of symbology in the building and the meaning, and the museum is scheduled to open in early 2025, and we're right here in Arlington, Texas, right beside AT&T Stadium, right beside Globe Life Field, right beside Choctaw Stadium. It's going to be amazing. We're going to have some high tech experiences. We're going to have virtual reality where you'll be able to communicate with a hologram of a Medal of Honor recipient, say Major General Pat Brady, helicopter pilot, Medal of Honor recipient from Vietnam, just did some, I mean, just heroic things when he was getting guys out. But you know, you have a hologram of General Brady, and you can ask him questions: where he's from, his favorite foods, what it means for him to serve. I mean, all of these different types of things. I think that'll be very engaging. But we're going to have a high tech experience, lots of high tech experiences, lots of event space, just a place for people to reflect and be inspired and hopefully learn. I mean, these are American heroes that have preserved our freedom and democracy. Just, you know, it's amazing. And I think for our veteran community, you know, our Medal of Honor recipients, you know, they represent all of us. You know, they represent all of the military. They come from us, which in turn, they represent all of Americans because they come from America. They represent Americans from all the different states. So I think there's a lot of meaning in that. Just a great place to be inspired in a family friendly environment where you want to take your friends and family and try to learn some of those values and how you can apply those values in your life. You know, maybe you don't have to pick up a rifle and go head to head with Al Qaeda, but you can learn a little bit about, hey, you know what? I have someone that's sick in my family, and I'm going to do the right thing, and I'm going to help take care of them. That takes courage to do that. That takes commitment. I'm going to do the right thing. Or, hey, this kid's getting bullied in school. What can I do to prevent that? You know, there's things that we can learn these lessons and apply them in our life.
All right. So where can people help out, and where can they find you social media wise? Where can they find out about the museum, about the foundation? Where can they find that on social media?
Sure. Yeah, I think the website's listed here. You can go to www.mohmuseum.org. We have a ton of things on our webpage. You can follow us on all the social medias. Unfortunately, I'm not on all of those different social medias, Instagram, Facebook, and all that. But I believe we have a great showing on all the different social medias. We're also on LinkedIn, so please follow us. Go to our website. We're still fundraising. We still need money. So if you want to donate, or if you know anyone that wants to donate, send them our way, send them my way. You can find me on LinkedIn. There's not a lot of Darrell Utts out there running around on LinkedIn. So you can find me fairly easy. If you want to receive the weekly updates, I send them out every Wednesday. It's a pretty cool update. This Wednesday's update is going to be super, super cool. I'm not even gonna spoil it, but it's
Okay.
gonna be a really great update. But yeah, find me, send me an email. I'll get you added to the list, and yeah, we'll go from there. Let's stay connected.
Darrell, this has been an amazing conversation. You have an amazing story. I'm so glad that you're finally stepping out there and putting that story out. I know that before you've even volunteered a bunch of people to speak, maybe on your behalf, not on your behalf, but to tell their story, and you kind of play in the background. So I'm so happy that you're doing it now. And for people that are listening, watching, there's a possibility that there is going to be 2 eras of Green Berets sitting down and talking to each other about their experiences and about the similarities and the differences on a further episode of this podcast. So we're looking forward to that. We're working out the details. He mentioned that we had a phone call yesterday. We're trying to set up those details. So we're very happy about that. Now, you know where you can find Darrell. You know where you can find out about the museum, the foundation. If you guys want to find more about me, you know you can always find me on Instagram at the DTD_podcast. You can find me on Facebook at the DTD Podcast. And you can find me on YouTube, where all these conversations are in video form. Now, the one-stop shop, it's dtdpodcast.net. You want to see more pictures of Darrell and what we were talking about, some of his friends, some of the operations, it's going to be there on his episode page. You can also find the audio and the video of both these on his episode page. That's dtdpodcast.net, probably the greatest website that's ever been built. This week, we want to welcome our brand new sponsor, my friend Mac at Mac Belts. We all know that nothing stands up to wear and tear like a good leather belt. If you're looking for the toughest leather belt on earth, then you've come to the right place, Mac Belts. They're all handcrafted in the USA by veterans who are serious about their craft. Now, we all know Mac served in special operations, and we know how important it was to have reliable equipment that could withstand tough conditions. That's what he designed here. Each belt is handmade with thick, full-grain leather, detailed stitching to keep the belt rugged and lasting for years. I have 2 of them. They're absolutely fantastic. Now let's talk about the steel hardware. It won't bend or break under pressure. But the reason why Mac belts are even more special is because with every purchase, a portion of the proceeds go to help military service members and transitioning service members. But we have something new. The buckle from Mac Belt. The mission, to design the toughest belt buckle on earth. And they did it. Their team is pleased to introduce a finished product with attention to detail that's unmatched. Its design is like no other thing that exists on the planet. It holds up to everything. They've achieved mission success and reinvented the belt buckle along the way. It's made in the USA by USA-built machines and other veterans. It's expertly engineered to combine modern precision and rugged use. Look for it on macbelts.com, where you can pick up both your belt and your buckle. Don't forget to stop by Police Coffee at policecoffee.com. You know they're an officer-owned business. They're dedicated to crafting the finest coffees and blends and shipped as soon as they're made to provide you with the freshest coffee available. Each batch is roasted fresh by people who knows what it means to stay vigilant, and their specialty coffees do not waste one drop when flavor is concerned. Their coffee's some of the best you'll find, but it also serves an important cause for my side of the fence. They give back to our community. 50% of their profits go towards helping family members of police officers who fell in the line of duty. So if you're looking for a new flavor, One Ranger is a great one. Texas Pecan, I know, Darrell, that you'll probably love that. You can find it at policecoffee.com. And when you go there, DJK10 will give you 10% off your order. Do not forget our sponsors. That's what keeps this show going. Please go and help them out. Mac Belts, our newest, and Police Coffee, who's been around from the beginning. We'll catch you guys on the next one. That's Darrell. I'm DJ. This has been the show. We'll see you later. Bye.